Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to part two, the episode of the KONKOMBA history. As usual, the presenter is Peter Mbayi Bajo. If you remember, some time ago, I brought out part one of the KONKOMBA history and promised to come back with part two that will be dealing with the policies of the colonial governments and subsequent governments and how the KONKOMBA authority was forcefully taken away and put under the Gomba control. As usual, like I said in the past, that some of these things are going to be emotional. They are going to be provocative. I will be critical on those authorities that need to be criticized, whether in the past or current. And people that, in my view, have tried to manipulate or to interfere in the KONKOMBA land and the KONKOMBA authority. Now, to start with, this time around, my brethren, the Gomez, are going to be provoked to some extent. But I am sure at the end of this presentation, most of the Gomez will be happy that this came out. I have mentioned earlier that people should not get me wrong. The Gomez and KONKOMBAs are not bad people. I am a KONKOMBA by tribe. So I am not going to sit down here and blow the trumpet for my people only. I must tell you that the few years I have had to live with the Gomez, I have realized that they are most generous people, most peace-loving people, and most honest people in the North. And both tribes will attest to that. Why am I saying this? The Gomez are content with what they have. They don't overreach. They don't take what do not belong to them knowingly. And so I have the conviction that if the current youth of Dagbon had been told the truth by their forefathers, that they had never had any encounter in any form of wars to defeat KONKOMBAs in order to occupy or take control of their lands administratively, I believe the youth of Dagbon would have said, you know what? All these that have happened over the years should never happen again. They should have been honest to tell the youth of Dagbon that it was the colonial masters, the British, that manipulated and helped to take away the KONKOMBA authority and put under Dagbon control. And also the lands of KONKOMBAs that are being managed were forcefully put administratively under the Gomez. I think that this discussion of disturbances between KONKOMBAs and the Gomez in the North would have been a thing of the past. And I'm sure that I'm going to bring out some of these examples for those who want to know what actually happened in those days to be able to make their own judgments. For example, recently, if people listen and watch the news, it was all over that the Gomba Constitution of 1930 was being reviewed people who are interested or who were interested and have paid much attention to it have made their own conclusions and judgments. As usual, I will not go into people's personal matters unless, of course, it is affecting my people, the KONKOMBA people, which indeed had affected my people and is affecting my people. So if you remember, I said that the partitioning of the KONKOMBA kingdom or the demarcation of the KONKOMBA lands were completed after 1928. During that time, it was obvious that that part of the KONKOMBA kingdom, which was going to become Gold Coast, had become Gold Coast. And the rest that was going to become French Togoland had become French Togoland. There were no disputes after that. There were some discrepancies, disturbances, and a whole lot of issues, which I will come to. But it was clear. The KONKOMBAs understood that this time around, their kingdom had been divided. You see? So, is it not interesting for anyone, after all the facts of the Gbon kingdom and the Gbon history, dated back to the 1300, 1300, whatever BC or AD, I don't know, that they had had kingdoms and lands and authority? Is it not interesting that all that time there was no constitution? There was no the Gomba constitution. And so it is obvious, or it was obvious, that KONKOMBAs were not part of their authority. KONKOMBAs were not being controlled by the Gomes before 1930. And I want somebody to come out and challenge me and give me evidence to show that before then, these lands were being controlled by the Gomes. So now you can make a judgment of your own that if the Gomba Constitution was born in 1930, it clearly shows that after the demarcations, that the Gomes had connived with the then colonial masters, the British, to forcefully put KONKOMBA lands and control under their administration. Anybody can challenge that, but that is a fact. So the Gomba Constitution was born in 1930. The demarcations of the KONKOMBA kingdom and lands were completed in 1920. So there's no doubt that there was that ploy to put that part of the KONKOMBA land, which fell under Gold Coast, under the Gomba control. You see? So if 1930, that was the Gomba Constitution, it clearly shows that KONKOMBAs were not part, even though their purpose or intentions were to put KONKOMBAs under their control. To some extent, administratively, they thought they had achieved whatever they wanted to achieve. And some of these things are the woes of the disturbances in the northern region up to date, between the KONKOMBAs and the Gomes. See, so it seems that was going to work for them. But clearly, it wasn't working. So leading up to the 1940s, thereabout, after their constitution, all the way to the 1940s, there were still resistances and a lot of aggression, especially in the Sabuba enclave. By then, that of Sangul area had calmed down. That of Sangul area had calmed down. And so the emphasis or the focus was not on Sabuba area. So they were now trying to now put all the lands and the Sabuba area under the Gbon control, or the Gomba Constitution, as they term it. Some of these policies saw the aggression and the disturbances leading up to the 1940s, which the most revered security expert with a military background in one of the newspaper review or whatever panel discussion it was, where he referred to the 1940s, the confiscation of the KONKOMBA cattle, and the allowance to atone for some of the atrocities or some of the disturbances that had happened in the area, which I am going to elaborate on. You see, it means that even though that Dagbon Constitution was formed, it did not serve the purpose that the Dagombas thought it was going to serve, because the KONKOMBAs were still resisting. And part of that history, most of that history that I'm coming to, happened in the Zagwe enclave. People may have heard of it. I don't know, some may have heard of it, they just didn't care about it. And they didn't know that those things or those policies were the root causes of the disturbances in those areas up to date. And this will bring to the topic of why most of the skins, the KONKOMBA skins in Sabuba area, are under the Sansona directly and not the Yana. Are we proud of those developments? No. But do they have meanings? Yes, they did, which I will come to. I may be everywhere trying to put the pieces together. Some may have come before the others, but they will come the way I will put it. And just for the purposes of people who will want to learn, they should go in there, do research, and find out and put the puzzles together. Because I am saying this all from my head, and I'm going to put them together as I know them. So, like I said, I will tackle the authority of the Sabuba area skins falling under the Sansona. That is the chief of Sanson, and why they were not directly under Yana. See, the KONKOMBAs in that enclave resisted every form of the colonial masters' invasions and intimidations. The KONKOMBAs were not listening to the colonial masters, nor were they listening to any Dagomba authority, including the then Yana. So it became very difficult for the British government, the Gold Coast government, to put KONKOMBAs under the indirect rule that they had envisaged. There were a lot of encounters and frictions. There were a lot of killings, burning down of communities. Why so? Because the Dagombas had now followed the colonial masters. Wherever they invade, the Dagombas enskin a chief there. No matter how small the Dagomba community will be, that chief supersedes everybody in the community, including the larger community, which were the KONKOMBAs. So these things were going on. The KONKOMBAs were resisting. So the Dagombas and the colonial masters, the British, on one side against the KONKOMBAs only. You see, to the extent that KONKOMBAs were not cooperating with anybody. So it became very difficult for the British government to now rule them or put them under the indirect rule that they had established. By then, the Yana did not have control. He couldn't control anybody. And the only person who understood the, the culture and traditions of the KONKOMBAs was the then Sansona. Among the whole lot of people the kings that were around the Dagomba area, it was only the Sansona who understood who the KONKOMBAs were and what they stood for. And the KONKOMBAs were not listening to anybody. They were not cooperating with anybody apart from the Sansona. The history is there, and people should look at it. It was not as if they fought and conquered KONKOMBAs and now put those kings under the Sansona. It was a mutual respect and understanding between the parties, because the KONKOMBAs saw him as the only genuine person among the Dagombas who was trustworthy to deal with. So the British, after having done all this without any success, concluded that if the Konkombas were ready to work with the Sansona, why not? They candidly or skillfully put all the Konkoma skins under the Sansona, led by the Sabuba skin. So if somebody is sitting somewhere and doesn't know why the Sansona is skinning Sabuba area chiefs, including the paramountcy of Sabuba and not the Yana, then you should not go beyond what I've just told you. Those documents will be there for people to review. I may not have seen them, but that is what it was. It was not any kind of war or friction that put those skins under the Sansona. It was a mutual agreement and respect. And the British had no choice than to do that. So if today there's a dispute between the Sansona and the Yana as to who skins chiefs from Sabuba area, and it goes to any kind of arbitration, the Yana is going to lose. Because those things are binding in the old books, which have not been reviewed. They are still binding because they were not reviewed. You see? So those who are interested to know can find out. Were Konkombas happy about that? Are we happy now? We were not, and we are not now. But it was far better than the overreaching authorities that the British and the Yana had wanted to do. See, this will now bring to the fore the aspect of the 1940 disturbances that the security expert had earlier on said, and had told people that it was not right for the Konkoma cattle to have been confiscated or anyhow to compensate for the atrocities or the disturbances that had occurred in the village of Zagwe and Natag. Now, those who are living in that enclave will now know the current communities, but they were known as Zagwe and Natag. That was where the incident occurred in 1940. And I'm going to tell you right now what happened, which could have been avoided or should have been avoided by all costs. You see, like I said, the Gomez had now put sub-chiefs, small chiefs, I'll call them, in the Konkoma communities to now do oversight or to control the Konkombas on behalf of Yana and the British colonial masters. This didn't go down with the Konkombas. As I said, it didn't, and it shouldn't. So under the Zagwe incident, which was now known as the Zagwe riot, it was over vaccination of cattle. I don't know the name. We used to call them in those days when we were very small as a cattle guard. The veterinarians, those who vaccinate cattle, they used to call them cattle guard. Those who are grown enough will know the real name, where they have to go to communities, from community to community, to vaccinate cattle against anthrax and the like. So in that incident of 1940, which I don't want to mention specific days, everybody or anybody at all can go and look for it and make your own notes and judgments. The chief of that community, Zagwe, was a Dagomba. The majority of villages around the Natago and all other areas were Konkoma communities. So in that incident, the cattle guard, the veterinarian in charge, you would call them a veterinarian, or the veterinary officer, I don't know, but whichever way you will put it, to make sense to people who take care of animals, those doctors and the experts. His name was Mr. Pinker. He had come to Zagwe area to do the vaccinations because it was an annual affair. So the chief of Zagwe gave him 2 young men. One was Musa, and the other one was Haruna, to lead Mr. Pinker and his team to the KONKOMBA communities for the vaccination exercise, as they always did. See, so when they got to the name at that time was Ujagando. In those days, I don't know how it is called now because most communities had changed names because of the stigma that was associated to most of them, because some fled after those incidents. So people who come back to settle will now rename those places, not under the old names. So Ujagando, people will know where it falls, either under the Saboba district leading to Nambil area or wherever. That is where the incident occurred. So when they got to Ujagando, the veterinary officer alleged that some of the cattle that were being vaccinated that year had no record, which means they had come from other communities or somewhere that has not been vaccinated to the community. So the elder, we used to deal with elders, so the elderly person in the community came out to explain to the veterinary officer that due to the demarcation and petitioning of their lands, some of their relatives fell under French Togoland. And so they do have this form of relation where the cattle will have to, they have to send it to their relatives to take care of, and when they are grown, they share the proceeds. They give them some and they take some back, as it was done usually. And so those cattle that came from the French Togoland, from their relatives, had no record. This was a simple issue that could have been dealt with by the veterinary officer. But I told you that some of these things had come with extortions, intimidations, just to force the KONKOMBAs or push them to such an extent that they will surrender their authority and will feel that they cannot live on their own. So this veterinary officer, wanting to proceed to the next village, handed 4 of these elderly men to Haruna and Musa to take them back to Zagwe, the chief palace. That was the inception of disturbances. And they now dubbed the Zagwe riot. That was the beginning. These 4 elderly people were taken to the chief palace ostensibly to report the incident to the authorities in Yendi and Tamale for further action. But instead of the chief doing that, he got his men to flog or cane these 4 elderly men, the KONKOMBA men, with what the Gombes call baranzim or baranzim. It was a fresh cow skin which was molded into a form of a string which would be dried. When it is dried, they use it on you. When they cane you or flog you, you will get blood oozing out of the body. That was what they did to these 4 old men, the KONKOMBA men. Was that not enough for their descendants to see these old men flogged that way to start something? And somebody will sit somewhere and blame KONKOMBAs? That these people who had lived there for so many years, and as a result of the colonial masters' intent to enrich themselves, had now put them under somewhat awkward authoritarian rule to be subject to this kind of treatment. And people will think that it was just good for the KONKOMBAs to fold their hands and sit back. These old men got back home with blood oozing off their body. That was the punishment they should receive for non-vaccination of their cattle. Was that proportional to the crime, alleged crime that they had committed? So if somebody will not ask, so was that proportional again for the KONKOMBAs to have come in retaliation? That is left for somebody to judge. Any kind of action which is deemed unnecessary will have a reciprocate, which will be the reaction, which might not be proportionate enough too. Did we like what happened? No. Was it avoidable? Yes. If it hadn't started, these were what Konkombas were going through. Nobody will tell you these stories because they feel that it is embarrassing enough for people to know what Konkombas went through. That incident, which was dubbed as the Zagwe riot, saw the chief beheaded. The Zagwe chief beheaded. Compound burned down, a lot of people killed in that incident, which arbitration afterwards was to confiscate the KONKOMBA cattle to atone for those crimes. You see? So after that incident, any KONKOMBA that was traveling from Sabuba area, non-Tatale Sangu area, anywhere in the northern region was arrested, whether a child, woman, anybody was rounded up anywhere. They will lock them up for so many days before they will even realize that those people have not even heard what had happened in those communities. They went into communities to confiscate weapons of the KONKOMBA people, bows and arrows. They seized them everywhere, intimidated people to the extent that people have to flee. And that was why you found some of them now in the southern part of Ghana. And if I will go back to that incident of Atabubu, where the chief referred to as the KONKOMBAs were very bad people, and as such, their tongues were amputated. That was part of the incident. They confiscated the bows and arrows of the KONKOMBA people, and the men that they had arrested, most of them thumbs were amputated. If you were a lefty, your left thumb was amputated. If you were a right-handed person, the right thumb finger was amputated, because they had realized that it was that one that was used to shoot the arrow. So they maimed them. This was what KONKOMBAs went through. You see? And people will just sit down somewhere and think that for the purposes of politics and maybe the bag of rice and some tin tomatoes that any political party or candidate will give it to you, somebody will, will senselessly make a mockery of a tribe that had undergone through this kind of torture. They will try to protect their land from foreign invasion. And these were the prices they paid. Did anybody ever hear that? KONKOMBAs will not cry over spilled milk. They will not be intimidated. Not by anybody, including the white man. You see? So now, these things went on to the extent that the district commissioner at the time, because the KONKOMBA were not giving up upon all these intimidations, they were still going forward, doing their daily activities and protecting their land from foreign invasion. The district commissioner on the 17th of September, 1940, wrote a letter to the regional commissioner by then and told him that the KONKOMBAs were like amusing children. Amusing children. I don't know what that means, but clearly, he said, due to that, KONKOMBAs do not deserve any leniency. What an impudence of a stupid commissioner. In the quest to enrich yourselves and to take people's land, where they had to fight to the last drop of their blood, this is the way you describe them? They were living there for so many years without any form of intimidation. They didn't know any white man. So if you had come there, what did you want there, by the way, if not to extort and to enrich yourselves? And you term the indigenes as amusing children who do not deserve leniency? From who? From who? Leniency from who? They didn't invite you to their communities. You went there. These were what KONKOMBAs went through. And that resulted into most of their authorities taken away from them. You see? So if anybody was not happy to hear that KONKOMBAs were very bad people, and so that was why their tongues were amputated, they were not stealing. And it's on record up to date that KONKOMBAs are the most hard-working people of the North. There's no doubt about it. Wherever they are, they farm. They work hard. If they are in school, at workplaces, they do their best. And their best, if not 100%, will be 99.9%. Everywhere. You can mark it on the wall. Check it anywhere. Well, not with that standing today, I would say, that is not to say that with the growing cultural assimilations, there are not some few bad notes in there. They are. And that will be the 0.9, maybe. So 0.1 will be the bad notes in the KONKOMBA communities. And we should be proud of our people. See, so KONKOMBAs were not into war or any form of disturbances there. They were only fighting for their land, the land that they had occupied for years. And for them to sit down, for it to be taken just within some few minutes, was not going to happen. Which did not happen. So right now, administratively, all those lands are being managed by the Dagomba authority. But is that a fair game? That KONKOMBA should be happy? No. Those things have to reverse. It has to go back to the way they were before the white man came. So all along, when I mentioned the Dagomba Constitution, the current now Dagomba Traditional Council was known as Dagomba State Council. It was known as the Dagomba State Council. This will tell anybody that the KONKOMBAs were not being controlled by the Dagombas. Because if it was the Dagomba State Council and we are not the Dagombas, why should we care? You see? So with those stories that had come out that the Dagomba Authority Kingdom under the 1400s had embodied the KONKOMBAs and their allies wasn't true. It wasn't, because the statistics are there. Those institutions that were named were mainly the Dagomba constitutions, the Dagomba State Council, which was later on turned to be the Dagbon Traditional Council, which we have today. Does it still say that the Dagbon KONKOMBA Traditional Council? It still says the Dagbon Traditional Council. So KONKOMBAs, by law, shouldn't be affected by anything that the Dagbon Traditional Council is doing. But since the skins were not put under the Dagbon Traditional Council, they will have no choice than to be under it and to be part of it. These are some of the anomalies that we wanted to be corrected. That two separate, huge tribes in the north, tribes, if I say, yes, tribes in the north, who have nothing in common in terms of culture and traditions, for one to be put under one, is not workable. If you look at the structures in terms of religion, KONKOMBAs are either Christians or pagans. If I say pagans, traditionalists. People will say, oh, it's shameful that you don't know God, you don't know Christianity. Christianity is a foreign culture. It's a foreign culture. People should not be proud that Christianity and, what do we call it, the Muslim religion, they are all foreign culture. They are not African. If they are African, the north is in the north. And that of the Christian came from the Jewish land, Israel. We shouldn't be proud of those. We were traditionalists, pagans. We pour libation. Do the Dagombas pour libation? No. So why do we have separate cultures and traditions, that one of them should be managed by the other with different traditions altogether and cultural practices. That is why there's the need for the KONKOMBAs to have a traditional council of their own. They could still be under the regional House of Chiefs, yes? And that brings to the question of the dying northern region, which now becomes the northern region and then the Savannah region. When it used to be the northern region, by the 2010 population census, the KONKOMBAs formed second largest. If they were all registered, they would have been more than that. They could have been the first, the largest tribe in the then northern region. And even that, they did not form a tribe that has control over their own lands. And that formation, the Dagombas had the Dagbon Traditional Council. The Gonjas had their various traditional councils. The Mamprosis had a traditional council. The Nanumbas had their traditional council, and they were all under the regional House of Chiefs. Why not the KONKOMBAs, the second largest in the region by then? And somebody will sit somewhere and just feel that KONKOMBAs are making noise for nothing or for no reason. Now that it has become much smaller, which KONKOMBAs we believe still form either the largest in terms of population or second largest still, needs independence. And that is the Transitional Council of our own. That should be now. And clearly, there cannot be any region at the moment. There cannot be any new region. But if we have our Transitional Council like it was, and they had their Transitional Councils and they were all under Regional House of Chiefs, we can still be under the Regional House of Chiefs, but with our own Transitional Council. That is what the authorities should be looking at. And since I'm not a politician and I'm not a fan of any political party, I am not going to go there because all political parties know what they need and what the strength of the KONKOMBAs are. Yes, but for the purposes I told you, I will criticize, I will commend, I will give commendations where they need be, I will. And that is not going to be political. It will be political, but I am not going to be partisan. I will tell in brief all the political parties what you have done for KONKOMBAs and what you need to do. All tribes in Ghana need the national cake in terms of development and in terms of appointments. So in the past, people who follow critically the KONKOMBA voting pattern will realize that during the JJ regime, KONKOMBAs were mainly NDC, PNDC, NDC. They voted alongside the NDC. Why? Just for a few things that I will cite, not during the JJ regime, I come from Tetele Sangul, as I always said. You could come to the river Oti at Sabah area and sleep there for 3 days because there was no bridge. So when that short bridge, which was constructed by the colonial masters, overflows eastbound, you will have no choice than to sleep in the mosquitoes under the other side of the river for 3 days before you could get to Yendi, just 40 miles. The former president, now late, constructed that bridge that you see, that we have no season. You cross it anywhere, anytime you like. Was that not commendable enough for KONKOMBAs in that area to be voting NDC? The Kwalaba area, the road, the bridge at Kwalaba, was constructed by the same former president, J.J. Rawlings. Was that not enough for them to vote NDC? The Damanko area was constructed by the former president, J.J. Rawlings. Was that not enough for the KONKOMBAs to vote for NDC? You know how many lives that we have lost in those enclaves during the floodings? You see? So they saw that somebody was looking for their welfare. That aside, when the former president Kufuor came, he started giving appointments to KONKOMBA key members who were in the MPP. That was where we saw Deputy Regional Minister for Volta region for the first time, a KONKOMBA being a minister in the Volta region. And then we had the first time a KONKOMBA being the regional minister of the Northern region. They were enough to entice KONKOMBA to now turn to MPP as well, because the national cake can be divided in any form. You see, so if I sit down here and say I'm not going to be political, I'm lying, because I know what both political parties have done for the KONKOMBAs. Now, during the Mills Mahama, former president's time, they did their part. I did not see much of the infrastructure development under the Mills Mahama in the KONKOMBA areas, apart from the fact that I heard that road to Saboba was under contract, which didn't see any light as of now. In terms of political appointments, they had our main political players, seasoned politicians like the Mabengbans, the Blujos. The Mabengbans wasting in Angola, seasoned politician who could have been a cabinet minister with a lot of experience and intellect, was wasting in Angola. And you had the Harunas. He's a learned guy, but he's a very young politician. They were the cabinet ministers. KONKOMBA did not complain. Did we? We didn't, but we were watching. And some of us, like me, I said people were happy that the Mabengba was sent to Angola as an ambassador. That wasn't something I will be happy about, because he was more than that. He needed a cabinet minister to help his people. And NDC should have known better. If you have the opportunity to come back, watch what I'm saying. Now, the current administration of Nana Akufo-Addo came up, and people are seeing it. People are seeing what he has done in terms of, what do we call it, political appointments. Has he not done enough? I am not going to be sincere with you, I'm not going to talk about the economy. I'm not an expert in that. Ghanaians should judge that, and I'm not going to go there. But we are okay with what he has given us so far. So if any political party like the NDC, former President John Mahama, which you have the potential to come back, if you ever come back, KONKOMBAs are not going to get less than what we have right now. We are not going to get less than that. You could give all the tribes in Ghana, give them their fair share. We are not worried, but we should get our fair share too. Because under this current regime, we have gotten our fair share. We are not going to be happy that other people didn't get their fair share. They should be given their fair share too. But we should get our fair share under any dispensation of any level of governance. And now to our roads. Now to our roads and infrastructure. The Tatale Yendi road, Zabzugu through Zabzugu, has not seen any facelift, not to talk of asphalt or tar form of any form. This is a commercial area. The road leads directly to Togo. Saboba area, during flooding, nobody can go there. The enclave through Paza all the way to Accra. All these farm produce that you see in Accra do not come from the sea. They are from those lands. People have to suffer to carve these things there. So what we are saying in conclusion is that KONKOMBAs need development too. If we can't get anything at all, that road from Kajabi area through that place to through Pasa Damanku all the way to Saboba should be done. When you get to Yendi, branch to Tatale all the way to Togo. As at late as 1987, Togo, you ask the customs over there and the immigration service that are in Tatale, that road had been tarred all the way to where those customs are manning and giving the government of Ghana money. And they are sitting in the dust doing that job. That part of the Togo area has been tarred. No small village in that area is left with rough road. It's tarred all the way for over 20 years now. What is happening to Ghana? And these are all KONKOMBA areas. We need development too. If I say this and somebody says somewhere to say I've been political, fair enough. I just want any political party that will come into power and recognize KONKOMBAs. NDC, MPP, you have done your part. Whether one has done more than the other, I cannot judge. The KONKOMBA people will judge that. And if any of you should continue to be in power or come back to power, then you should take clue from what I've just said. Like I said, if I say this and somebody will sit somewhere and say they are hurt by all that I've said, I do apologize. But on a very good note, I am sitting down here to tell you that, like I said, in conclusion, that the Gombas are not bad people. So far, some of the Yanans were very bad. They made sure KONKOMBAs never get to any level. And if they are still alive or they are dead, they should be ashamed of themselves, trying to suppress the KONKOMBA people. So far, the current regime ahead, I have not read anything untoward about the current Yana now. I am sure he is law-abiding because he's a grown-up. He is an experienced person. So far, I haven't heard anything, any policies that he is putting in place to suppress the KONKOMBAs. And can he keep it up? Yes, he can. Yes, he can. He should know that KONKOMBAs are not his enemies. KONKOMBAs are ready to work with him. And I'm telling you, the KONKOMBAs, those who have chieftaincy issues, there are structures in place to take care of them. Do not take guns and bow or arrows. Do not let any Dagomba man come and tell you that if you are not enskined by a Dagomba man, you are not a chief. No. Our cultures are different. You can skin your chief, and for the purposes of administration, registration, and gazetting, you will have to go and show the chief to the current president of the bank, who is Yana, and then you will have the opportunity to go and register and get gazetted. There is nothing wrong with that. Those structures have not been changed, and we cannot change them. We will change them, but they are not changed yet. So under the current dispensation, this is what we should be doing. And nobody should run to the Dagombas that come and scheme me as the chief. If you are not entitled to any scheme, do not dare. And if you have policies or if you have problems and they call you to the Yanans Palace and you are not satisfied with the verdict or whatever it is, go to the traditional council. Those are the structures that are put in place legally to deal with chieftaincy issues. Yana is not against that. He's the president of all those institutions, and he's not going to be against that because he understands how they work, and his advisors understand how they work. Those are former institutions that are built and recognized by the government to look into issues relating to chieftaincy status. On this note, again, I have put my information there already in part 1. So if you do not get my information this time, go back to part 1, and you will see me again. Maybe this will be the end of part 2. There might not be part 3. If anything will come at all, it will be different from what we have right now. I am grateful to all of you, and thank you for listening. Once again, my name is Peter Mbayi Bajo. Thank you.